Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Things that are worth discussing at Media Day. That guy on your screen right there, Scott Frost. Did you see what he said about his home state school, about his alma mater, and probably most importantly, about the place that he once coached, not very successfully, okay? So let's go ahead and dive in. Scott Frost, listen, I've said this on the show a million times. When I was growing up, and I'm old now, Nebraska was kind of what Alabama was, to a different generation, maybe what Ohio State is now in terms of a team that was always relevant, always this, always that. Well, Scott Frost in 2017 is at Central Florida, UCF, leads them to a 13-0 season. Of course, on this show, it always comes back to Auburn. They beat Auburn in the Peach Bowl. Producer Matt, I'm sorry for you to relive that moment in time. But Scott Frost has an incredible year, beats Auburn in the Peach Bowl, and then, of course, goes to Nebraska, his alma mater. Producer Matt calls it fake news. The rest of us remember it for what it was, an incredible moment in an incredible season. By the way, that was also the year that UCF just started claiming a national championship that didn't exist. So that was a fun moment in time for college football, okay? But I bring it up because he leaves Central Florida, goes to Nebraska. It certainly does not go well. 16-31 overall. 3-9 in his last full season. They give him the final year. He goes 1-2 and gets booted in September. And I think in a story that I think, unless you're a college football diehard, you kind of forgot, Scott Frost got hired as the new head coach at Central Florida this year. So again, proving it all comes back to Auburn. Gus Malzahn leaves to take the Florida State offensive coordinator job. UCF opens, and Scott Frost is now again the head coach at UCF. And so, listen, I don't know Scott Frost personally. I've always liked the demeanor. I've always liked the whatever. But he takes the podium at Big 12 Media Days and is asked about the situation at Nebraska. I don't know if Chris Vanini from The Athletic was the one who asked the question, but he was certainly the one who had the tweet that went viral. Scott Frost asked about what he learned at Nebraska. Producer Matt, if you have the tweets, you can pop them up. He said, quote, "What did I learn at Nebraska? Don't take the wrong job. Woof." And then what did he say after that, Producer Matt? He said, quote, "I said I wouldn't leave UCF unless it was someplace you could win a national championship. I got tugged in a direction to try to help my alma mater and didn't really want to do it. It wasn't a good move. I'm lucky to get back to a place where I was a lot happier." Okay. This is, in my opinion, the classic case. I always say it on the show. Two things that are seemingly different can be true at the same time. Maybe Scott Frost didn't really want to leave UCF to go back to Nebraska. But at the same time, there were a lot of reasons that things went wrong for Scott Frost at Nebraska, and zero of them had to do with it being the wrong job. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. First of all, again, I'm not claiming that I know Scott Frost. I do think it was a tough decision for him. If you remember that time, 2017 was kind of a wild offseason, because the Florida job opened. Remember, it was Scott Frost and Chip Kelly were believed to be the favorites there. Chip Kelly goes to UCLA. Scott Frost goes to Nebraska. Dan Mullen gets that job. But it was a real thing of like, is Scott Frost going to go to Florida? Is he going to go to Nebraska? Is he going to stay at UCF? And it really wasn't until a day or two before the AAC championship game that it actually leaked that he was going to take the Nebraska job. And if you remember at the time, and we just referenced it, he actually took the Nebraska job, recruited for Nebraska, then came back and coached UCF in the Peach Bowl. I thought it was a really cool thing to do in that moment. I think he really felt like, I love these kids. I love this school. Again, maybe he did not want to really leave. And again, I thought it was cool that he kind of decided, you know what, I'm going to come back. I'm going to coach this team. I want to finish what I started. And he did it, and UCF ended up winning that game. So I could see the scenario where he's sitting there saying, you know what, I really didn't want to leave. Maybe I shouldn't have. I was pulled in a different direction. Maybe I should just stay. Okay. That can be true. What can also be true is what I just said a second ago. Just because things did not go well at Nebraska It's not all Nebraska's fault. As a matter of fact, I would say most of it was not Nebraska's fault. And I'll say this. If we're taking a blame pie of what went wrong at Nebraska, I would say the vast majority of it, I would say probably falls on Scott Frost's fingers, on his shoulders, excuse me. So first off, let's credit Nebraska, okay? Because they gave that guy every chance to succeed. Through 4 years, things were not going well. If you remember, the second to last year was, I will not lie, it was one of the wildest seasons that I have ever seen. Nebraska finishes 3-9 in Scott Frost's second to last year. They lost 8 of those games by a touchdown or less. Nebraska fans, if you're watching, I'm so sorry that we're reliving this, but it's important context, right? I remember watching those games because, again, as a child of the 90s, I want Nebraska to be good. And so you're watching every single week. Can they figure out a way? They lose to Illinois in week 1. I think it was actually week 0, but you get the point. They played Oklahoma at Oklahoma. This was peak Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. Barely lose that game. They lose in overtime to Michigan State because they gave up a punt return with like 3 minutes to go to tie the game and force overtime. They barely lose to Michigan 32-29. That was the first of 3 straight years Michigan won the Big Ten. That was the first of 3 years they made the college football playoff. That was the year they lost to Georgia. Doesn't really matter, but they lost to the Big Ten champion by 3 points, okay? And so you go through the season. By the way, the only game that they did not lose by a touchdown or less was Ohio State. They lose 26-17. Remember watching that game. They had a chance to take the lead late in the fourth quarter. I think they were down 3, go for a touchdown. Adrian Martinez, in the way that only he could, missed a wide open pass. Ohio State comes down and scores, game over. Okay. So I just bring it up because you can't say that it was the wrong job when you kept losing games. And then, despite all that, Nebraska, because he was an alum, gave him the benefit of the doubt, said, you know what? We're going to give you another offseason. You're losing all these close games. Maybe you can turn around. Then what happens? Going into the next year, week 0, you lose in Ireland to Northwestern. Remember that game? Weird, onside kick at the worst possible time. Northwestern gets momentum. You lose that game. How about this? Northwestern did not win a game the rest of the season. They went 1-11. Their only win was in week 0. Their only win was before the season started against Scott Frost in Nebraska. Then you come back, you beat North Dakota. Congrats on that FCS win. And you lose to Georgia Southern. And that was the game that Scott Frost got fired. And so you got the extra year. You got every benefit of the doubt. And even if, by the way, I understand that in the NIL portal world, it's easier to flip a roster and do all that. But you can't say you didn't have enough time. You can't say it wasn't the right place. You can't say you weren't given every opportunity. And you can't say that a lot doesn't fall on your shoulders. When you go in your final 2 seasons, season and a quarter before you get fired, when you go, what is that, 4-10, 4-11, and of those 11 games, you lose 10 by 1 score, at a certain point, that does kind of fall on the coach, does it not? Oh, by the way, let's not forget, again, weird onside kick. You lose in overtime to Michigan State on a punt return because you don't have a special teams coach. These are all things I remember talking about in the moment. You lose to Georgia Southern. That's not a job thing. That's a Scott Frost thing. Scott Frost can't be losing to Georgia Southern because Nebraska should never be losing to Georgia Southern, okay? So that's that. I don't buy it. And here's the other thing. A lot of the stuff was self-inflicted. There were NCAA violations during COVID. Again, no special teams coach, and you lose because of special teams plays. It was kind of a train wreck, okay? And while we're on the subject of train wrecks, I'll be very delicate in how I say this. But if you are to believe rumors, let's just say that, maybe Scott Frost, how do I say this? There were some things that I think in hindsight he could have done differently in terms of how he spent his free time and who he spent it with. Listen, it's all speculation, but I'll say this. Lincoln's a reasonably sized town. I've been there. Great Golden Corral from what I remember when I was there. Great Golden Corral. But there's enough people that can corroborate, again, that maybe Scott Frost was a little loose with his free time, that maybe he was in places that he shouldn't have been as the head coach of Nebraska. with people he shouldn't have been with. There are reports and rumors about maybe he missed a meeting with Dylan Raiola when Dylan Raiola was the number one quarterback in America, and his uncle and father both have Nebraska ties. I think his uncle was even on the staff at that time, about why Scott Frost missed that meeting. So I'm not going to speculate on that. I'll let you kind of go down that internet, Twitter, Google rabbit hole. But again, as weird as it sounds, I'll just say it. Like, I'm wishing Scott Frost luck because I think, everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe Nebraska wasn't for him. And I'm certainly wishing Nebraska luck because I think it's like that cliche, is college football better with Nebraska being good? I actually think it is. I actually think that it is. So yeah, don't know what else there is to add other than to say that Scott Frost, there's a lot of blame to go around, but a lot of it falls on you, my man.